Meeting to order. Roll call shows that Councilor Wingard, Councilor Robertson, Councilor Renier, and Councilor Perry are present. We may have some others joining us remote. I don't see them here now. First item on the agenda is agenda review, and I believe you have an addition.
We do have an addition. It's going to be order 21-147, 148, sorry. And I'm going to need somebody to go grab it off the printer for me. But it is an order appropriating funds out of infrastructure reserve for the FY22 infrastructure projects.
Is everybody all right with adding that to the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Approval of minutes of June 3rd, June 14th, and June 28th, which were included in our information. Could I have a motion to approve, please? And a second. Seconded. Any additions, corrections, omissions? As usual, they are excellent. Thank you, Nancy. And we need a roll call, please.
Not as long as we don't have any counselors joining, we can just have a
Okay.
show of hands.
So all those in favor, please raise. And it is unanimous. Okay, Lori's joined us now, so that's going to be a roll call. Public hearing to consider a Class 1 malt, spirituous, and Venus liquor license and victualer's license for ZRKM LLC, doing business as Tagarita,
Takarita.
2 Mill Street.
And I'm Patrick Guesty, Code Enforcement Officer, and staff has completed all inspections and is asking for approval.
Do we have any public on our video?
No public at this time, Tom.
Okay. So no public comments, any questions from council? All right, then we will move on to the next public hearing, which is to consider a written policy governing the conditions upon which members of the town council, boards, committees, and the public may participate in public proceedings for those bodies by remote method.
So that's me.
Yes.
So prior to the pandemic, municipal officials in public bodies were not allowed to participate in public meetings remotely. So while we would have people call in and participate, their votes were not counted in the process. It meant that you had to have your quorum here and passing votes, physically present, passing with 4 affirmative votes. So when the pandemic came, Governor Mills issued a series of executive orders, and one of those executive orders allowed for the remote meetings that we have so enjoyed up until now. When the declaration of the civil emergency expired, that put into kicked off the process of phasing out the executive orders. So 30 days after the expiration of the civil emergency, the authority under the executive order to hold remote meetings went away. So luckily, Trace Stewart, who was our representative to student government for several years, is now a senator and put in a bill, LD 32, which would allow for remote meetings. So what I had the opportunity to chat with the town attorney, and he just gratis, which doesn't happen very often, drafted a proposed policy for us, because under the statute, you have to have an adopted policy, and that policy had to go through a public hearing process, which is why we are doing this. So I want to just be clear that the council could decide that it didn't want to allow for public remote meetings. It could go back to just the way things were. If you decide you want to keep remote meetings, we have to kind of lay out there for the world to see exactly how we're going to do it. And many of the same elements that we've had to do under the executive order are still in place, meaning we have to make sure that we provide notice to the public how they can participate. The only way under the law that we could have a fully remote meeting is if there was an emergency or some other physical thing that stopped us from being able to meet in person. The idea is, even if you don't have a quorum of counselors in person at the meeting, that you would have a place for the public to come to participate. This policy follows the statute. You can almost read the statute and line the policy up with the statute. So one of the things that it does say and the statute requires is that the expectation of the town council is that its members will meet physically when practicable. So that means if somebody is on vacation and they wouldn't otherwise participate, but they can remote in, that's fine. Somebody is sick, recovering from surgery, has to be out of town for work, is with their new grandbaby in Southern Maine. Those are all reasons, according to both MMA's interpretation of the rules, that we could have remote meetings. The thing about the remote meetings, it's a little bit different because it kind of envisions this hybrid approach, is that if we have one counselor who is remote, we must notice and provide the opportunity for everybody else to be remote. So in the past, we've had a call-in number and somebody could call in or Skype in individually. You can't do that anymore. That now has to become a public process. Just as you are used to doing through the pandemic, the expectation is that members of the body, meaning the council or the planning board, you're making this policy for the whole town, will be able to see and hear each other if it's on video and hear each other if it is just on audio. So if it was a teleconference. Members of the public, if it's an opportunity for the public to participate, they must be able to be seen and heard or heard by the entire body. So you can't set it up so only people in one place or using one means could see and hear them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The one place that we added some minimum requirements, the other minimum requirement is that if you have anybody participating remotely, you must do a roll call vote. Otherwise, you can do your show of hands. If you are participating remotely, your vote counts and you are considered a participant for the purpose of the quorum. One of the places that I did take a little bit of, I pushed back against the attorney a little bit, was the idea that when the first draft of this policy came, he had it written that there had to be at least the quorum of the body meeting in person, and the person who was chairing the meeting had to be in person. I pushed back a little because in the statute, it doesn't say you have to have a quorum present. I do think if the intent of the statute is to ensure that the citizens can come in person and address the body in ways that would be appropriate, it does make sense to have the person chairing the meeting kind of in person, which is how I talked it through with the attorney, and we rewrote that section under section 5-1. So now it just says that the person authorized to chair the meeting shall be in person. So if you're remote and you're the committee chair, I think the thought would be that you would ask somebody who was here to actually do the chair. And I think I have,
It's kind of an aside question, Sophie. Is it our intention to provide remote access opportunity to the public only when we're doing remote, when we have a council member that's remote?
so my plan is to offer a hybrid meeting structure for every meeting, so that we can train the public how they can find us easily, but also staff, because I can just envision, like, we've got a fire captain over here who's got to wait to the very end of the meeting for his item, and perhaps it would be nice if he could do what we did with Zoom, that worked out. So I would leave that opportunity for staff in some situations as well.
I have a question too. I actually have two.
Yep.
So if we are, okay, let's see how I can say this here. Do we assume that we will always meet in person unless we can't? One of us can't, or we're gonna do a remote. Okay, there's that one. So we're just gonna assume from now on in person. Okay. How soon in advance does staff need to be notified that we won't be able to be in person? Like, is that always going to be set up so we don't have to say, okay,
So where we might end up going, just out of ease and to make it not confusing to counselors, is that we might not give people panelists invites. Instead, we would, you could come in through the public access and Belle would just promote you to a panelist.
okay,
Is probably how we would end up doing.
okay. So just
That way it's
so one
easy.
access, and then, okay, that was my other question. Well, I had one more thing that I wanted to say. Is this also Augusta's policy? So are now people driving to Augusta from their various locations?
So my understanding is that the legislature exempted itself from LD 32.
Okay. And not for us. I think my confusion with all of this is going back to, in-person meetings, and especially for our state, is that we have a climate emissions reduction that we're working on. And this was a perfect solution to not driving from Caribou and, to Augusta. And so I see why they have exempted, if that was their point, was to exempt. I have one more question too.
Oh, I think they're, I mean, we have a representative here, but my understanding is they're gonna come up with their own rules.
Okay. And can a committee choose, like can Terry's committee or my committee choose to just be remote? Can we choose to just say, you know what, as committee members, we would just like to do remote. We just want to do it as a Zoom.
So
meeting.
if people cannot practicably be here, and the
Okay.
committee chair determines that it's a legitimate reason,
Mhm.
then we would set it up. Your staff person and your committee chair would be here,
Okay.
and
So
other people would be on Zoom.
My concern about when we're starting to kind of morph this into some other creature is that we are given what our committee and council assignments are 3 months in advance.
Right.
So I always make sure that within my own structure that I go and put those in first and foremost. And then I adjust my schedule, like my business
yeah,
stuff. and
my
kind of
committee is
morph that.
organic.
Yeah, so I think part of Cheryl's issue is that with the environment committee, they are people who are really kind of busy doing other things, and we are just kind of getting in an hour.
Right.
Or I think, Cheryl, it would meet the purpose here as long as we were set up to have the public in this space and you were here.
Okay,
And Belle was with you.
she will have to be.
Any other questions or comments on this proposed policy?
Did it look okay?
Good. And I certainly agree. I read the law and it pretty much follows the law. Just good. You ready to move on? All right. So, let's see where we go. Yes, we go to,
One more page.
Am I missing?
Acknowledgements.
acknowledgements, yes. Council acknowledgements.
I have no acknowledgements at this time.
Well, bam.
I've had a couple of discussions recently with some of the landowners who make the access to their property available along the Stillwater River Trail and other places in town. And I'd like to acknowledge their graciousness and remind the public that we use those spaces at the discretion of the landowners, and we should use them appropriately. Thanks.
Good comment. Thank you.
I have a couple things. First, to let the public know that one of the best sources of information in town is our Facebook page. I looked at it today. I think there's like 1,700 people that like it. So I think I use it all the time, and I post it to my own page to just give people information which they appreciate. And having said that, one of the things I just noticed on there was tomorrow our concert series continues. Village Green featuring Allison Ames Band at 6 p.m. And lastly, I, as a Red Cross New England board member, I wanted to thank Orono for coming out on July 6th. The Red Cross is in dire need of blood, a lot, because people who put off surgeries are now coming back, and yeah, it's really a dire need. But I wanted to thank people here in town that came and need blood.
I have no acknowledgements tonight.
Just Lori.
Oh, Laurie, did you have any acknowledgements?
Yes, I want to acknowledge the staff for setting this up, that I could be remote. Thank you very much. And acknowledge the Orono paddlers. They finished their boat barn with volunteer labor and with donations from people in the community for the materials. It's beautiful, and they've started their Thursday night paddling, and they also have a week-long paddling for, I think, 7 to 11-year-olds. Acknowledge that we're lucky to have a committed community group in Orono helping us be the outdoor beautiful place that we are. Excuse me, outdoor enthusiasts, beautiful place that we are.
Thank you, Laurie. Ready to move on? Unfinished business. I believe we have none. Consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second,
Wait a second. Thank you. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Then let's have a roll call vote, since we have a remote participant.
Counselor Grenier,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
in favor.
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
and Counselor Osha.
Approved.
Thank you.
And so it's 5 in favor and there were none opposed.
Thank you. And now we're on to new business. And order 21-129, order appointing Elizabeth Hopnagel as the RSU 26 director, filling a current vacancy until the annual municipal election in March of 2022. We met with all of the applicants. We had an excellent response to our notice. 3 citizens were willing to participate, and the council decided on is Hopnagel. Any questions, comments?
We just did a motion.
Yep. Oh, come on.
Move
Have a motion to
approval.
approve.
Move approval.
And a second, please.
Second.
Great. Ready to vote?
Yes.
We need to do a roll call again.
Counselor Grenier,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
and Counselor Osha.
In favor.
And that's- The vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Doesn't it seem weird to not have to say, you're muted? You're muted.
Yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages. Moving on to order 21-130, order approving ordinance amendment to chapter 18 land use to amend section 18-106 F, schedule of dimension requirements to reduce the minimum lot area and minimum lot width in the medium density residential district.
Hi, everyone. Kyle Drexler, Town Planner. So this ordinance amendment, as Council Chair said, is to reduce the minimum lot size and lot width or frontage requirement in the medium density residential district for those lots with public water and sewer. This recommendation was specifically made in the comprehensive plan. It's gone through planning board public hearing, council public hearing, and is now ready to come up for adoption.
Any questions?
Just
Yes.
need a motion. And a second.
Move approval.
And a second. Second.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments on this motion?
We have discussed
We
this
have indeed.
at length.
Hearing none, let's call for a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Greener,
In favor.
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
and Counselor O'Shea.
I'm in favor of this, and I'm in favor of us moving from this to smaller lot sizes.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. Order 21-131, order approving ordinance amendment to chapter 18 land use to create section 18-114 village residential overlay district, an optional overlay district that would allow for the creation of smaller lots if a property is owner occupied. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second. Second. Thank you. Kyle, I
So,
think you're on again.
yes, this ordinance amendment followed the same path and timeline as the previous amendment to the NDR district. It supports many of the same goals that the comprehensive plan had as far as bringing in more affordable housing opportunities in the medium density residential district in town. The amendment's gone before planning board and council for public hearings, and it's now up for adoption. Happy to answer any questions people might have.
Questions, comments? Again, something we've talked about at significant length. Are we ready for a vote? Okay, roll call vote.
Counselor Greener,
In favor.
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
and Counselor O'Shea.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you. Order 21-132, order approving ordinance amendments to chapter 18 land use to create section 18-154 solar energy systems and amend section 18-31 definitions and section 18-106 schedule of uses to define zone and create performance standards for solar energy systems. Kyle again.
Checking off
Busy
my
man.
homework. So, we had a moratorium in place for large scale kind of commercial solar development in the town. And the goal during that was to develop specific standards for those larger scale solar systems. But at the same time, we created a use and some additional standards to promote solar energy systems throughout the town and to give it more applicable standards within the ordinance. So this has gone again through planning board public hearing, council public hearing, and is now ready for adoption.
Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. Questions, comments for Kyle?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
The ordinance mentions the vegetation in terms of limiting the clearing of vegetation to an appropriate size for the solar array. It doesn't specifically address the maintenance of vegetation in order to, like, keep that array operating. I mention this because there's one particular solar emplacement on Route 2 as you head south out of town. It's not in Orono. Seeing significant vegetation grow over it. So does the the installer or the owner of that array have any responsibility to maintain it?
I guess that would be, I mean, thinking in other cases of development where a business, a restaurant doesn't necessarily have specific standards in the land use ordinance as far as property maintenance. I imagine any standards there would fall under kind of a more generalized ordinance that would cover general property maintenance standards for all businesses or all development. So we didn't include anything specific there for.
But I do think one of the things on our list of things to talk about is talking about vegetation and some other property maintenance issues just in general. And this, I think we would capture in that as opposed to here.
Yeah.
In this ordinance. Does that make sense? I think you're on the right track, just a different section.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Any other questions? Ready for a vote? Nancy, once again,
Council Green,
In favor.
Council Perry,
in favor.
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingate,
In favor.
and Council Ocean.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you.
I want to acknowledge Kyle for all this work that you've put in. That, I mean, you've been so flexible and changing and moving and to meet all of what we've been saying. You've done an amazing job, so I think it should be acknowledged.
Thanks, everyone.
I think
Well
this is the
said.
first time I've seen you in person in like
In a
a
while.
year and a half.
Thank you, Kyle. Moving on to order 21-133. Order authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement for hot mixed asphalt paving services with B&B Paving of Herman in the amount of $466,565.50 for the 2021 construction season, including projects for Kelly Road, Essex Street, Westwood Drive, Water Street, Lower Middle Street, James Street, School and Plummer Street, Broadway, Cedar and Elm Street, Riverdale Drive and Beach Street. There, that's a lot of pavement.
A lot of paving.
Could I have a motion, please?
Move approval.
And a second.
Second.
And now Rob.
Yeah, so on July 1st, we received bids for the paving services contract. We got 5 bids. The low bid was $466,565, B&B Paving. They are a well-known local paving company. They don't have a plant, but they buy their mix from Sargent Corporation, which is a good mix. It's the mix that we use. So I'm fine with using them for our work. They've done some work in Old Town recently that I've been able to take a look at, and it's holding up pretty well. So the $466,000 budget was bid was roughly $66,000 under what we had estimated. And when we plug those prices in, we're on course beyond about $90,000 under budget on our infrastructure work for now, assuming things don't change between here and there. So
In the construction climate, that's amazing.
yeah, so obviously I recommend that we move forward with them.
It seems like an awful lot of streets.
Some of them are very
Are we
short.
ever gonna be able, yeah.
Well, it's
be able
one
to-
neighborhood and then a couple pretty big sized projects, so it's doable.
Okay,
I have,
yeah.
I do have a question. As we look around what's going on right now, the Bangor gas is tearing everything up. How does this play into, like we just did in Mill Street, and it looks like some places have already been kind of chopped up on it. How does that work?
So we'll phase in after them for this work here. What they've done this summer will get patched eventually here before the end of the month. But we're gonna let them go first in that neighborhood. We're working with them in a number of locations around town that affect other projects that we'll talk about a little bit later, but they coordinate pretty well with us.
Anything else? Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Nancy, please.
Council Green,
In favor?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingate,
In favor.
and Council Ocean.
In favor.
Thank you.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Great. Order 21-134. Order approving a contract with the Mahaney Subdivision Utility and Roadway Improvement to Sargent Corporation of Stillwater in the amount of $1,211,460, with $760,000 to be paid from the wastewater clean water state revolving loan fund for sewer work and $452,000 from the 2020 infrastructure general obligation bond proceeds for road drainage work, and further authorize the town manager to execute related documents as necessary.
Move approval.
And second,
Second.
thank you.
So Joe Madigan had unexpected surgery. He is recovering this week. So Rob and I are going to try to carry his load for at least that part.
Yes.
This bid came in just about where people expected it to come in. The split, so when a bidder submits a bid, they give us a tally of they break the job down into parts, Mandy kind of breaks those into parts, and they put specific numbers behind each part. So this is significantly underbid for wastewater and a little overbid for for public works. So we have submitted this breakdown to DEP for approval before we start the work. It doesn't matter with the vendor because they're going to get paid the base bid price. I don't know if you want to describe just a little bit about what that project is so that we have that on the record.
Sure. Yeah, the project is, the most significant part of the work is the sewer upgrades. So it's about 2/3 of the budget. It includes replacement of existing manhole structures, all in the Mahaney development, so the Mount View, Aaron, Frost area, as well as lining of the existing sewers. So they won't be digging them up, they'll be lining them like we've done in the past. That includes the piece that goes down through, so all the sewer in that neighborhood goes through conveyance that runs down over the hill across, I guess what used to be, or part of it still is, the school property, and then onto our property, down behind, in the area behind Asa Adams. And so lining of that line is also included. The other part of it is the public works side, and that is just a basic rebuild of the roadways and some pretty important drainage improvements. This neighborhood became a priority for us because of the drainage issues and the infiltration that the sewer lines were seeing, because the drainage wasn't great. There's a lot of water in the saturated soils underneath, and those were finding their way through cracks and crevices in the sewer lines. And so this project does two really important things. It limits our infiltration, keeps the flows down at the plant, makes improvements to drainage in the neighborhood to make quality of life a little bit better, and make the roadway structure last a little bit longer. So really important project for us.
Is there any digging on school property?
There is a bit, yes. There's
There's one manhole.
manholes to find, there's one right in the middle of the soccer field.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, but they've been working with the school on all of that, and the timing of that will be appropriate.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Rob, can you just talk a little bit about the timing and what we had to do in order to get the project bid?
Yeah, so you mentioned this year, the environment of contractors being extremely busy right now. And so our original plan was to try to bid this and get it to an earlier council meeting to try to get it awarded. But we had a pre-bid construction meeting and only 2 contractors showed up. And both of them said that if we kept the current schedule, because it was required to be completed at the end of this year, that they weren't going to bid it because they simply couldn't put a good bid ahead, and in good faith honor that schedule. So we chose to change the bid schedule a little bit and extend the completion of this project into October of 2022, which allows the contractor that, both contractors, the time to get started with some of the sewer work. The lining work may happen over the winter, but probably the road construction part will be next summer. And since we ended up with 2 bids, we were feeling pretty lucky about it. And like I said, the Sargent Corporation, with the other project that they're already going to be working on, they've got a 3rd project for DOT that's going to happen next year. So we'll be working with Sargent Corp for a couple of years now.
And we're happy to be working with them.
Very much so.
Is this going to impact our budget at all for this year or next year?
No, so
Nope.
I've gotten some feedback from residents who were spending lots of money and our taxes are gonna go up even more. Everything that we are suggesting today is an allocation of existing funds that we've already kind of talked about and the appropriation based on the budget that you approved.
Okay.
And this bid result fits, we'll see it in a little bit, fits really well into the general obligation bond that we'll be talking about.
Ready for vote? Nancy,
Counselor Grenier,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
in favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor?
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
and Counselor Osha.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. Order 21-135, order authorizing the town manager to enter an agreement with Sebago Technics for planning, design, and engineering services for the Main Street Safety and ADA Improvements Phase 1 in the amount of $44,500 to be paid from the 2020 Infrastructure General Obligation Bond proceeds. Is this Robert again? Could I have a motion, please, first?
Move approval.
And second? Second. Thank you.
So this is the next step in the process for getting these improvements on the street. Where we are right now, we've through the process of gotten through the process of doing the survey, done the concept designs. We talked a little bit about a month ago, I guess, in committee about where we landed with all of that. Unfortunately, the full build out is a little bit beyond what our budget is right now. And so we chose to focus on making those crosswalk improvements, making those crossings as safe as we can, adding a couple further past Westwood at Gilbert Street and Spencer Street. And this project comes in basically at the budget that we have, that we can fund out of the infrastructure bond, out of the bond and the infrastructure reserve. This phase, this next step with Sebago Technics will take us from the conceptual step to actually making construction drawings, getting the DOT permits that we need, going through the utility coordination process, getting those, completing all those plans and specifications that we need to put it out to bid, and this takes us right to award of the contract, which they anticipate is going to take them a few months, and we probably won't be opening bids for this project until October.
And we're thinking work will be next year.
And you mentioned during our previous discussion that you were also coordinating with public transportation.
Yes.
Are you really the highest rate of pedestrian cyclist commuters in the state?
Per capita.
Yeah, that was in the comprehensive plan, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No.
Ready for a vote?
Counselor Grenier,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson.
Yes, in favor.
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
and Counselor Osha.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Moving right along. Order 21-136. Order authorizing the town manager to purchase a 2021 Wackeneusen WL32 wheel loader from Central Equipment Company of Stillwater for $88,086, less the trade-in for the 2013 Wacker Newson L30 of $14,000, for a total expense of $74,086 to be drawn from the approved FY22 capital equipment budget. Motion to approve, please.
So moved.
And a second. I'll bet this is Mr. Yerxa.
I'm still here. So yes, this is the mini loader for sidewalk maintenance that we primarily use it for. The mini loaders have proven to be a very useful piece of equipment. We use it all year long. And this would replace our 2013 that we discussed that is a little outdated and undersized. The quotes came in right on budget. The trade-in was a little higher than we had budgeted for, which leaves us about $6,000 under budget for this purchase.
Great.
Good.
Is that correct in the explanation that this model might be as much as 3 times faster in
Yeah.
moving snow than the old one?
Yeah, so the WL30 was decidedly undersized in hydraulic flow to the front, which drives the blower. So you couldn't use a double auger blower with that original model. The new model has a higher flow rate, and the blower is now with a double auger blower with a piston pump drive, so it actually it's pretty tough to slow it down.
Wow.
It's not as fast as the big ribbon blower that's on the holder that we have, but it rivals it. It's definitely a different machine than the one that we're trading in. for sure.
Wow.
Now we just need some snow.
I'll take what we got.
All right, moving on to order 21-137. Oh, we didn't vote. Thank you. I'm just in a hurry here.
Yeah.
So Council Greenhill,
In favor.
Council Perry,
In favor.
Council Robertson.
Yes, in favor.
Council Wingate, and Council Osher.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none
Yeah,
opposed.
Rob, have you ever watched snow removal in Fort Fairfield? There's YouTube videos on this. Where
Yeah.
Every storm, they will go and pull all the stuff into the middle of the road, and they have this snow blower that is the size of this room,
Yeah.
and it goes easily 5-10 miles an hour, and it just fills up trucks, and they clear it down like amazingly. And it also snows 120 points,
Yeah.
inches up there.
They've got an airport, right?
No,
Let's go.
no, that's Pascal does. But it's interesting. if you get
It's a
a chance.
similar machine.
Yeah.
Old Town does that every once in a while because they've got the blows from the airport.
Okay, now we're moving on to order 21-137. Order authorizing the town manager to purchase 2 Ford F-250 4x4 pickup trucks from Whited Ford Truck Center of Bangor for a total of $72,505. 2 Maxon ME2 power lift tailgates provided and installed by the Shift Company,
Yes.
LLC of Waterville, and at a cost of $3,195 each, and up to $5,000 of miscellaneous equipment to outfit the trucks with funds drawn from the approved FY22 capital improvement budget. And the motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Thank you. Keep going, Robert.
So the budget for this purchase was 90,000, as we discussed during the budget process. We worked with 5 vendors and got 9 quotes for vehicles. All these vehicles will have to be ordered. There's nothing on the lot that would beat what we're looking for. Usually it's either way too extravagant or not big enough for us. So both of these vehicles will have to be ordered, and we're still not exactly sure when they will be delivered, but getting this process moving is definitely gonna get them here sooner than later. The 2 trucks are just basic work truck F-250s. We'll set them up to tow. We're going to put the lift gates on the back. And then the accessories budget is to cover toolboxes. I think we're gonna have to replace our mobile fuel tank. So we have one of the pickups that we replaced in the 2009 has a diesel fuel tank on it, so we can deliver fuel like out to the landfill, or a lot of times instead of bringing the sidewalk machines back, we'll bring the fuel to them so they can keep going. So there's some things like that. I don't anticipate the $5,000 number being met. We'll probably be well under that, but that just makes sure we will be covered.
Do you have any idea what the new Ford F-150 electric trucks cost? What are they-
About twice that.
About twice that? Okay.
And they're 150, so they wouldn't be set up to haul the kind of equipment.
Have you had a
that we
chance
would-
to test them out?
I
Yeah.
have not.
So the delay, is it always because of chipped that everybody's, if you
What
want,
my understanding is that everything that,
nothing that's really got anything on it? If you
Yeah.
want, yeah, okay.
yeah, there's, from what I understand, fleets of trucks in parking lots
Oh, yeah.
waiting for the chips to come in.
Any other questions for Rob?
No.
So this is also about $6,000 under our approved budget.
Correct.
I have a feeling there's a plan.
Yeah, I was
to
gonna say,
use
just
that.
wait, yeah.
Pose for the moment.
Ready for vote?
Yes.
Nancy, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
Council Ocean,
In favor.
and the vote is 5 in favor and none opposed.
Thank you. Now moving on to order 21-138. Order adjusting the approved FY22 capital equipment budget to increase the projected revenue associated with equipment trade from 10,000 to 14,000. Decrease the approved budget for the mini front end loader from 90,000 to 89,000. And the pickup trucks from 90,000 to 86,000. And further increase the approved budget for the small tractor fleet from 35 to 44,000. There. Motion to approve.
So moved.
And second.
Second.
Thank you.
And
There's the money.
There it is, right there.
Okay, Robert, let's hear it.
So while we did well in the first two budgets, the second budget was a combination of a couple things. The purchase does what we said we would do. We're gonna trade in 5 or 6 units in exchange for 3. I underestimated what our fleet that would cost, and overestimated what we would trade, the value of what we would trade in. Which kind of surprised me, because I know with inventory so low, again, all the purchases that we're making, these are orders that we're gonna have to sit and wait on. So inventory is very low, so I assume that we would have strong trade-in values, but I think what they offered us is fair, but I honestly anticipated it would be a little bit higher, particularly for the smaller equipment, which is where I sort of underestimated what we would get. So yeah, this order kind of makes what we said we would do whole by using some of the funds that were underspent in the other 2 items.
Questions?
Not take us over our original.
It does not. No, we're basically borrowing about 9,000 from those other 2 purchases, and I think we were close to 12 under.
Any other questions or comments?
No.
Ready for a vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Nancy.
Council
Please.
Grenier,
In favor?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
and Council Ocean,
In favor.
and the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
One more. Robert.
No, it's good
Not
too.
quite.
Order 21-139, order authorizing the town manager to purchase a John Deere 3039R compact utility tractor with related attachments and an X758 John Deere tractor with related from Greenway Equipment of Bangor for a total cost not to exceed $29,143 to be drawn from the approved FY22 capital equipment budget. Motion to approve.
So moved.
And second.
Second.
So we worked with 4 local tractor companies to get bids for the trade-ins and the new purchases. All told, Greenway equipment was the lowest for these 2 purchases. The 3039 will be the compact tractor. That'll have the backhoe attachment on the back that we'll use at the cemetery. We'll have the bush hog to go with that Joe borrows for mowing right-of-ways and those sorts of things. We mow the landfill, a number of other things with it. Number of other things that we'll use that tractor for. And the X758 is the mid-range. It looks like a lawn tractor, but it's just bigger. It's the same type of machine that you may have noticed snow blowing the sidewalks in the wintertime in the tight areas downtown. We also use it a lot at the rink. That's how we clear the rink, snow blow and sweep the rink. We also use this as part of our mowing stock all summer long. On all of our parks, town-owned property, and cemetery as well. So.
Motion to approve. Oh, did we do that already?
Yeah.
We did that already, yes. Any questions or comments? Ready for a vote?
Council Greener,
In favor?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
and Council Osha.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there were none opposed.
And last for Mr. Yerxa. Order 21-140. Order authorizing the town manager to purchase a Ferris ISX 3300 zero-turn mower from Whittemore and Sons, Skowhegan, at a cost not to exceed $13,900. Motion to approve.
So moved.
And second.
Second.
Thank you.
So this is the third part of the plan to trade in those 6 units against 3 new ones. The Ferris zero turn, we've got one. It's an ISX 3200, but it was 3 or 4 years ago that we got that. We've been very happy with it. Very few mechanical issues with them. Their mowing efficiency is just crazy. It's really helped get our mowing crew. Without these types of pieces of equipment, our mowing crew, what we have for resources, couldn't keep up. But equipment like this helps us do that.
I watched them at the cemetery. And it's amazing how close they can get to stones and how quickly they can turn. That's very impressive.
Without a lot of damage to the turf.
Right.
Too. It's a really nice machine.
Questions, comments? Ready for a vote? Okay, Nancy, please.
Council Greener,
In favor?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
and Council Osha.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Sure beats
We'll see
using a
you in
sickle.
Thank you.
I think a sickle would be cheap.
Just some cows.
So on to more purchases in a different department. So order 21-141. Order authorizing the purchase of 2 2021 Ford utility police interceptors from Dowling Ford of Bangor in the amount of $38,920 and another in the amount of $42,109 for a total of $81,029 plus $23,000 for equipment purchases and setup through Custom Installation LLC of Levant, with the total cost of up to $104,629 to be drawn from the FY22 capital equipment budget.
Good evening. It's nice.
Oh, motion first. Motion to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
It's
Now-
nice to see you, Josh. Well, police chief. We've talked about this for several years about how we purchase vehicles and how we maintain the fleet. For 20 years now, the cycle has been 1 year buy 1 new car, the next year buy 2, back and forth. And that tends to keep the mileage in a range where we don't, to the point where we're doing major repairs and having a lot of downtime for the vehicles. We got off that schedule a little bit over the last few years to try and save some money for the town.
and bought one each of the years when we should have bought two. And we paid a little bit of a price for that. We talked about that with losing an engine and a cruiser and just having a lot of downtime. So the attempt would be to get back onto that schedule. This year's budget approved $105,000 for purchase of two vehicles. And there was a variance in the price because we talked about trying out one of the hybrid vehicles that Ford offers. They've been out for a few years and we're hearing good reports about how they're performing. So one would be a regular engine, gas engine, and the second one that was a little bit higher price would be the hybrid engine. And those bids came back from Darling's Ford and Bangor as being the lower bid, and we've had great luck with them, and they're reliable and great to work with. The $23,600 would be for all of the equipment purchases that we needed. And one of the things we're trying to do now is replace some of the older equipment that's in the cars, the mobile radios, the computers, the radar systems, and we'll talk about WatchGuard later, but that's where a lot of that extra money comes from. The mobile data terminals are expensive. The radios all need to be replaced. Those radios are over 20 years old. They're in those cars, and maybe just right around 20 years old, which is, the technology is much better, and we get much better coverage from the newer mobile radios. And custom installations has just done our work for years. It's nobody that really can touch it in price or quality, the installation of the equipment.
Questions or comments?
I'd be interested to see with the hybrid, what your cost savings is on fuel over
It will
the
be
life.
It will be fuel. The cars run a lot, and we have humans working for us, and they like to leave them running, or they forget to shut them off. This car will shut itself off.
Oh,
If it's not needed, it will kill the engine, and it will save a lot of fuel. And I think engine hours, that's where we'll probably see
And
some.
it's not much more.
It's roughly 3,000.
I'm
Right.
surprised.
It'll be interesting to see in a year where we're at with fuel savings in that particular car. We can measure that with the
most cars are hybrid nowadays anyway.
right.
Is there a plan to continue to just buy the hybrids as much as we can?
I think a year from now, we should be able to see, particularly with the units that are in the cars that monitor the GPS, but it also monitors idling time, fuel consumption. So we'll know within a year how much we've saved
Right.
based on the fuel costs that we have. So
Right.
my expectation is we're
It's a good
gonna
plan.
like what we see. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Ready for a vote? Go.
Council Greener,
In favor.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
Yes.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
and Council O'Shea.
Favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Excuse me. Moving on to order 21-142. Order authorizing the town manager to purchase 17 Glock 19 MOS Gen 5 9mm handguns with, I don't know how to pronounce that one. Flashcon, Trijicon, RMR Red Dot Optics and related accessories from Whitmer Public Safety Group of Coatesville, Pennsylvania, at a cost of $22,503.09, less trade-in value of $5,100 for a total expense of $17,403.09 to be drawn from the approved FY22 capital equipment budget, with the remaining $403.09 drawn from the approved police operating budget.
We talked a lot over a couple of different occasions.
Motion.
I'm sorry.
social.
I fall for it. Let's
Jesus.
talking.
And a second.
Second.
All right. I'm cheap.
I'll begin. We've talked on a couple of occasions at length about the use of force in law enforcement and threat assessment being the paramount feature about use of force. And when it comes to deadly force, God forbid, that threat assessment has to be perfect if we're going to get it right. And traditional firearms training has for years taught us to be to go against our natural instincts when we're trying to shoot accurately based on the sights that are on the weapon. And the move toward optics, which shouldn't have been so detailed in what you had to read because it was difficult, but the red dot optic, which mounts on top of the weapon, takes away the need for aligning two different sites on the front and rear of the gun, and it just puts the dot on the target that we're looking at, which is where we should be looking. We talked about the idea of our body and our brain is going to want to completely look at what might be threatening us and decide whether it is a deadly threat. And it's counterintuitive to try and then go back to the gun and line up the sights. This is much more natural, and it's the type of system we already have on our patrol rifles. So in this case, the guns happen to be in a window where they could be replaced, where it's the best, get the best trade-in value for them and avoid any sort of malfunction that could occur. So the optic, which has been growing for probably the last decade, the use of these optics on weapons is just the ideal time to purchase those optics, and then obviously have to replace the current guns that we have. That the new guns will actually accept the optic. This cost includes just a full replacement of all the gear that comes with the newer weapon. The newer weapon requires a newer holster to accommodate the optic. The weapon lights, there are mounting plates to go on the gun, and the sights themselves, which are actually more expensive than the handgun. So I'm happy to answer any questions that we might not have covered.
What sort of training will you put in place when you have the new weapons for officers?
Right, we'll go out to the range. Normally, it would, because it's the exact same weapon system in the past, the same weapon system, we just went out to the range and gave them a new gun and they qualified with it. Because this is a new sighting system, it should take a little bit longer, maybe twice as long. Except for the fact that already on the rifles that we qualify with every year, there is an optic. So they're already going to understand what the optic does. It'll just be kind of realigning where they position the weapon when they're firing, and it'll come very intuitively.
Other questions or comments?
I just think that it's important, given the crazy things that have been going on and what's like, I mean, look at I-95 or just things happening around, you just don't know, to be quick about reactions.
And a simple thing would just simply hold up your pen, stare at your pen, and then while you're staring at your pen, try to see what's beyond it. Everything beyond it's going to blur. And that's what we taught for years, is focus on your front sight and your rear sight, and whatever's the target, just blur it out and hope for the best. Well, you probably hit it, but you might not necessarily be seeing what it's doing and what it might be holding because you're not focusing on it before. And this allows that total focus on the threat.
Any other questions or comments? Ready for a vote? Nancy,
Council Green,
Favor?
Council Perry,
in favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
and Council Osher.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you. Order 21-143. Order authorizing the town manager to enter into a 5-year lease purchase agreement with WatchGuard Video of Allen, Texas for 6 in-car video systems, 17 body worn cameras, and the video as a system package at a total FY22 cost for installation and setup and lease payments of up to $28,612 to be drawn from the approved FY22 capital equipment budget. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Now, Chief Healy.
We've had cameras since I started doing VHS. Back then, they used to freeze in winter times, they're in the front of the cars. So we can never be without the video. It is so crucial to our operations for all the reasons you can imagine. The case management, evidence, officer kind of evaluation and use of force reviews and citizen complaints. So these are invaluable to us. What we have are in-car cameras that are, I think they were purchased in 2014 and 2015. So technology has moved on, they're aging, and body cameras that we purchased in 2016. That once again, we're at 5 years. We've replaced, I think, every camera through warranties over those 5 years. And I'm not wearing one tonight because we're down 2 or 3 that are being replaced right now. And we're at a point where everything needs to be replaced. This year we thought it'd be a good idea to increase the number of cruiser cameras that we've had cases where a spare car is being used and it turns into something that ends up in court. And the town looks as if maybe it doesn't believe in cameras, and we just simply didn't have a camera in that car that was being used that day. So we've increased from 4 cars to 6. And we've also gone with a full deployment of body cameras, so that every officer will be issued a body camera rather than taking them for the day and plugging them in. We had 8. So if we had a bigger deployment working during the day, not everybody had a camera. And then at the end of the day, not everybody could grab a camera because they were charging. So this will allow for everybody to have a camera issued to them. And there's one more feature with this system that isn't in here, that because of that video as a service program, we'll have a wireless system set up so when the cruiser pulls into the yard, into the parking spot, it'll download automatically rather than people removing hard drives, which just, there's a recipe for something to get broken or lost and having to bring it in and plug it in. This will just automatically download. So at least the cruiser numbers will automatically upload to that system.
And Belle, our resident IT person, is thrilled because the other part of this is offsite data storage. So it's data storage that is designed to be compatible with law enforcement use. We're not having to buy servers here and manage the data here. So I think it's a good package all in all.
And we've moved toward DA's office and moved toward a system where we could then, rather than burn disks, send them down for discovery, we can give both the DA's office and the defense attorney a link to the video that's pertinent to their case.
That sounds so old fashioned now, burning discs.
It was,
I
yeah,
remember doing that
agreed.
many years
They still do
ago.
it.
You do? I don't know how to do it anymore.
I'm shocked at some of the recent news of a neighboring large community just going into body cameras.
It's an expensive venture. I think that is
But
probably,
boy, I don't see how you could go down.
it can be a lot more expensive if you don't have, right?
Any other questions or comments? We're ready for a vote.
Counselor Greenyer,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
and Counselor Osher.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and none opposed.
Can I ask before you leave, I want to go back to the cars. When we were doing that, and my question is really about why can't we get 2 hybrids if it's only $3,000 difference?
Because we were just trying to figure out what it would work like. If it's gonna be on the same efficiency level, you're just trying to test it.
I was wondering, because I think when we were in council, when we were doing the budget, it was just, we need 2 cruisers. But now I was thinking hybrids were
Sure.
exceedingly expensive and.
They were the year before.
Okay,
And I think we certainly can't. I would like to see what happens. We had a hybrid car in the past, if it was the detectives at the time, and then I drove it for years.
Mhm.
And what I found was, and granted, it was 10 years ago,
right,
the cold weather and the hot weather made that engine run all the time in order to keep itself cool and warm
Right.
and keep the car warm enough. So perhaps that technology's improved dramatically
I think
and
it
it's going
has.
to be fine. I'm
And
not opposed.
I don't want to bring up, I don't want to
So-
bring this up. I was just
Yeah.
curious because I was thinking that a hybrid was way more expensive and if we have a car, if we have a fossil fuel car for however long they last, if we start switching our fleet,
So that car we would expect that car to end up lasting 6 years? Is that the rotation?
5 to 6, yeah.
5 to 6 years.
5 to 6 years.
So from my perspective, number one, the hybrids were a lot more expensive in the last round of bidding.
And that was my thinking.
Yeah.
Right,
The second piece was, you guys granted us $105,000.
right.
Josh came to me with the idea of, do we do 2? Do we do 1 of each? Do we do none? And I looked at the 105 and said, I can bring it in at 104, 460 something.
Yeah,
And with 1 of each. So I'm trying to kind of find the balance between, it gives Josh an opportunity to try it.
yeah,
And it comes in at the budget that was approved.
right.
I guess is kind of where I am, because if you're gonna pay an additional $3,000 unlike Rob, who had savings in one place to be able to fund an overage over here, I don't have that
Right,
additional savings.
In fact, in the previous item, we had to go to the operating budget to
Yeah.
meet the cost.
Yep.
right. And I am curious about what the fuel savings is too, on the other end
and
of that,
And I think when we get done with it,
right?
at the end of this year, when we come back next year for our one vehicle.
Yeah.
rep-
Two.
Okay, when we come back for our two vehicles.
They will have gone
Um,
down again, the hybrids.
Well, and perhaps the other piece too is efficiency. Maine is really starting to push
Yes.
municipal stuff. So I hear what you're saying, and
Yeah.
it's not falling on deaf ears.
Yeah.
Clearly, we're
Yeah.
trying.
Yeah,
But I think we've got a full electric code car
Right.
and a hybrid police car.
And this hybrid will be a frontline
Yes,
vehicle.
yeah, both vehicles will be frontline.
okay, that, I was
Yep, good
just
question.
thinking that it was just way more expensive, but it isn't. Really.
Kind of nice to see.
Yes, very nice to see.
Okay, ready to go, move on. Order 21-144. Order authorizing the town manager to purchase a new fire engine to the Houston Galveston Council's procurement process and execute a tax exempt lease purchase agreement with Androscoggin Savings Bank to finance up to $675,000 at a term not to exceed 10 years at an interest rate not to exceed 2.74%. Motion, please.
So moved.
And second.
So the first thing folks are gonna recognize is we have Captain Sirwa with us today.
Glad he's here.
Chief Lowe is teaching at the National Fire Academy this week. And so Kevin and his folks have been working on this project. So Kevin and I met, and we're gonna divide our presentation into two pieces. Who's gonna go first? Be kind.
Of course.
Actually, I think Kevin could probably be fine if you weren't kind, but it would be nice.
So I was part of the committee who helped build this truck, the specs at least for it. So we really assessed the community needs on this apparatus. This all hazards response. We respond to many different types of incidences. And this apparatus that we're looking at actually fits that bill. We're able to respond with the proper equipment to multiple types of incidences. So we really looked at that a lot. We had help from some vendors that helped us comprise the needs that we needed to have, as well as ensuring the safety of our members, the sustainability of that apparatus for years to come, and then also still trying to be fiscally responsible as well. So that's a little bit about the committee and how we've looked into this. We obviously we're looking to replace our older engine, which is 23 years old. It's a 1998. And so an average lifespan, as you know, you've probably heard this, is between 20 and 25 years for an engine. So with this apparatus, we're starting to see that end of life concern. We're obviously putting some money in to the engine right now to try to keep it going for a little bit. But with my expertise anyway, my experience, seeing this start, that end of life of an apparatus, is that the repair costs are probably not going to go down. They're going to either quickly increase towards the end of that life of that apparatus, and the cost doesn't really subside. Expect that cost to increase as far as that apparatus goes. Wanted to just briefly talk about the need for two engines. I know that that's been discussed in prior years. So we use both engines actually on multiple occasions. One being that in our rural areas where we don't have hydrants, that engine will respond with the primary engine. and do one of two things. One, it'll provide additional water on site at the scene, or it can also set up a drafting site to be able to get that water from a pond, river, stream to a tanker, and then that tanker to us. So that second engine is really important. And then the other thing is we utilize that as a secondary response. So if our primary engine is out and we have another incident, another call, we can respond with that second engine. That can be with on-duty staff, but also can be for callback crews. So if we are going out of town or we have an incident in town, we have callback crew come in, we have an engine available for them to respond to the next emergency, which has happened multiple times.
It does, it does. And I
So-
think one of the differences over the last 10 years is the protocols on the ambulance have changed, which require the engine to roll with the ambulance to, I think it's 5 or 6 different types of calls. So in the past, like 10 or 15 years ago, you'd say, well, you know, what's the likelihood we'd have 2 structure fires at the same time and need 2 engines? The issue now is more and more we are seeing the primary engine out with the ambulance and call come in, and whether it's another EMS call or something else.
So yeah, and then I know you guys have talked about the Houston Galveston procurement. So that really is a pretty cool program if you've ever looked into it. I know Chief has talked about it and also Sophie. But really it does a lot of the work for us. It saves money as well because it's competitive pricing. So you're not going to individual companies. This program is actually doing that for you, and it gives you a competitive price on an apparatus. And for us, that apparatus we've been able to look at and come up with that price, the 675.
So now that they have picked the vehicle we need, it's my job to figure out how we're going to pay for it. We talked about this quite a bit in committee, and we don't have $675,000 just laying around to cut a check. So we looked at the lease purchase arrangement. We did that with the 2014 engine. It worked very well for us. When we had discussion in committee, so we went out, the committee went through, I think, 2 or 3 different vendors to come up with lease purchase agreements through companies that work with large equipment like fire trucks. I added to that our financial institution that we do the bulk of our banking with, and Androscoggin Savings Bank, because they are well known for very competitive lease purchase agreements. Ultimately, Androscoggin sharpened their pencils more than everybody else and came in with the lowest rates. When we went to committee, there was an extensive discussion about a 5-year term versus a 10-year term. With a 5-year term, it's less years that you're paying for it and a smaller interest rate. 10 years, of course, 10 years that you're paying for it and a little bit higher interest rate. So I had originally suggested the 10-year, and the reason that I suggested that was looking at our debt, planned debt over time. We are pretty flat, and so it's not like if we went with a higher price, we would be able to fit that in. We're going to be looking for every one of these dollars adding to the budget. So a smaller amount seemed to work better for cash flow. The other reason that I did that is we're getting ready to undertake this asset management planning, where we're going to be looking at all of the fire trucks, all of the police cruisers, all of the public works equipment, and creating a plan where we can bring some stability to our purchases over time. So flexibility seemed like it was very important. I did have a conversation with Androscoggin Savings Bank, and they assured me that they would be happy to structure this lease with no prepayment penalties. So we don't even have to pay it off. If we want just to make a payment to principal at any point, it would reduce the principal, which would reduce the interest that we pay. So the Androscoggin lease also has a non-appropriation clause, not that we would ever want to use it, but if we truly hit the financial skids and we could not afford the payment, there is a clause in their lease that would let us go back to them. They would take the they would take the tank, the engine back, but we would not be responsible for the rest of the payment. So I wrote this order specifically to give the public notice that the term could be anywhere up to 10 years and the interest rate could be anywhere up to 2.74. If you want to look at a shorter term that comes with a smaller rate, we would just need to amend the order.
I appreciate your going back to Androscoggin and making sure that we could have no penalty for prepayment. Because I think that gives us a lot of flexibility. If we find ourselves in a position where we could make some extra payments and reduce our time and reduce the amount of interest that they're going to get over the long run, that'd be great. So with that new information, I'm personally very satisfied with the 10-year.
Well, and I think 10-year makes, speaking as a business person, makes total business sense. You don't put your, well, I know when we had the conversation, people are like, why not? There's a lot of dynamics because this is run like a, for lack of a better way, it's run as a business. So like if I did a purchase, I would say, yeah, give me that 10-year. But if this year I make an extra 50,000 profit and I can take that and say, I'm going to move it over here because I don't have that obligation anywhere else. So I think this 10-year locked us in a space where at least we know where we can do, and if we need to go further, we can go further.
And the interest rates are amazing.
Yeah, very good.
I was gonna say that too. And that was my question. Can we prepay, if we want to? I mean, I think I asked that question of a bank whenever I take out a loan. So yeah, I would go, I'm happy with the 10-year term as well.
I will just say, it is clear that Androscoggin wants our business.
Right.
Yeah, and 2.74 isn't that bad.
No, it's not bad at all.
So this was not budgeted.
So it was originally in the budget as an expense with offsetting revenue. We took both of those things
Okay.
out of the budget. So this will stand on its own. It will, when you see it in the budget, so we don't have to do anything this year because it will be next year. You will see loan proceeds come in and the expense go out the door. So just what's a little bit different for us, there will be another order likely on consent in September where you guys have authorized me to go do this loan. However, Androscoggin does require a bond opinion. So there will be a formal order that you'll have to approve. I'll put it on consent so Tom doesn't have to read it because they tend to be very lengthy. The other piece, unlike our general obligation notes, and with the notes that we do are all on the full faith and credit of the organization, Androscoggin's does not do it that way. They will actually take the truck as collateral. So we have to just make sure that we're good to it, pay for it.
What do we do with the engine that's been retired?
So in the past, for us, it's got a $22,000 repair hanging over its head. The amount that we run the engine makes it very susceptible to breakdowns. For a small town that maybe runs 25 calls a year, I don't know, like Brownville, that becomes a little bit more attractive for them to get a vehicle that they can put even $50,000 or $60,000 and run maybe 20 calls a year on. They're gonna run the life of that a little bit longer. So we don't make any, when we sell them, we put out the word on the MMA website that we have a vehicle for municipality. I think we got right around 13,000 for the last truck that we sold. That way, if it goes to another municipality, we've got a pretty easy process that we go through. If we don't get any takers on the municipal side, then we put it as a bid.
What happened? This is just a question. What happens to that revenue? Does that go into our general revenue fund, or is that dedicated to fire department operations? or-
No, the fire department would love it if those things were dedicated. It comes in as a revenue as sale of town property. Something that big, oftentimes you'll see me come back with an order asking you to put it back into capital equipment reserve or something like that. But ultimately, Jeff, you have all the power with that.
We,
Yes, we, the council.
So when do we look at, once this is all said and done, is that like readily available, or that piece of equipment, or do they have to
Oh,
build it?
no.
How long does that take?
Usually takes somewhere between 10 months and a year.
Okay.
So when we, in order to lock in the interest rate, we will do all of the paperwork. They will issue the money, and it will sit in a lease escrow for, until the truck comes. When the truck comes, so oftentimes when the truck is being built, there are steps along the way that we need to make payments. The chassis gets built and we have to pay so much, and then the next kind of the steps. Androscoggin will issue those payments on our behalf. And then a year from the date that we create the loan escrow, the first payment is due.
Any other questions? Ready for a vote? Nancy,
Council Green,
In favor?
Council Perry,
in favor?
Council Robertson,
favor.
Council Wingard, and Council Osher.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Fun to see you fight.
Yes. Yeah. So moving on to order 21-145, order authorizing the town manager to carry forward certain funds from the FY21 into the FY22 municipal operating budget to fund expenses approved but not completed in FY21 and special projects. That's you.
You want a motion?
So
Motion,
moved.
please.
Second.
It is me. So a lot of times I have a nice little spreadsheet for folks to tell you exactly what those funds are. Unfortunately, staff is continuing to work through, it's the reval, we're trying to close out the pool, and I don't want to carry forward funds that will then cause us to run a department budget into the red. So what I'm asking you to do tonight is to simply carry forward the $35,000 for the special intern project that we discussed at the Finance and Operations Committee. I will come back to you in September with the remaining.
Questions, comments? Welcome, Laura.
Oh, there she is.
Ready for a vote?
Yes.
Nancy, please.
Council Green,
In favor?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
in favor.
Council Osher,
In favor.
Council Mitchell.
I'm in favor, but should I vote since I'm joining in favor?
There,
And the vote is 6 in favor and there are none opposed.
nice. Getting there. Order 21-146, order approving the following budget for the remaining 2020 infrastructure general obligation bond proceeds, which were $1,932,289. North Main Chapel in College Heights, $1,100,450. Mahaney subdivision project, $472,000. MDOT Route 2 Culvert project, $235,000. Main Street Sidewalk project, $124,838. Motion on this, please,
Move approval.
and second.
Second.
Thank you. Is this Rob or is this Sophie?
Do you want me to start and then, okay, so, we borrowed $2 million for public works infrastructure last October. We asked Rob to give us a general budget for that. We have spent very little of that, about $60,000 of that. So from a practical standpoint, my suggestion is that we let everything kind of lapse back into the loan proceed fund, which gives us that $1.9 million. And I've asked Rob to create a new budget based on what he's seeing in on the face of the earth, what our bids are coming back as, and what the needs are. So he will, I'm sure, tell you how close he was, but I will let him do that.
Yeah, so really all these budgets are based on bid results, except for the Main Street Sidewalk project, which has a little bit of contingency in it still, since we're still only in the conceptual phase. But the North Main Chapel and College Heights project, the construction part of that is $1,040,000 with $60,000 in there for contract administration and on-site inspection. The Mahaney project, same situation, we just approved that. 452 of that is for construction and another 20 for contract administration and inspection. And then the Route 2 Culver project, that's also based on the bid result. The main DOT bid that in June. Sargent Corporation was the low bid, and we're responsible by contract for a third of the cost associated with that, which is comes to $329,000. But as you may recall, we have a DEP grant to cover culvert replacements and stream crossings that we've been holding for this project, and that's $95,000. So our obligation out of the bond is $235,000. And then the Main Street Sidewalk project is supported primarily out of the reserve, but this $100,000 that's left over was earmarked for that. We originally said $100,000 for this one, but if everything goes well in the other three projects, the remainder of those funds could be used on that, on the sidewalk project.
Questions, comments?
Can I ask, and Sophie or how does this North Main Chapel and College Heights, there's 145 on the next order?
Yep.
145,000 coming up on the next order, and it's the same North Main Chapel, College Heights for $1 million.
So
What's the connection there?
So
or
that
the
project
overlap?
is funded from a few different funding sources.
Okay,
So the bond proceeds basically made that project whole last year.
yeah,
Council had already allocated general fund dollars to help support that project in an earlier fiscal year. That lapsed to the reserve, so we're going to draw that back out of the reserve to help support the project
okay.
with the general fund, the
And
general
what,
obligation.
and is that added in?
No, these are
two
total-
totally separate.
Yeah, so.
Okay,
Yeah,
just
when
trying to
we-
find the relationship
Nope.
between the two.
So there are 3 pots of money,
Right,
actually 4, that Rob works out of with infrastructure. We have the general obligation bond funds, and we
Right.
have to be able to show people that we spent it on capital infrastructure. So we hold that it has its own fund on our books. The infrastructure reserve, if you, I don't know that anybody remembers except for perhaps Tom. For years, we would appropriate money in the general fund in our capital infrastructure budget.
Mhm.
And we get to the end of the year, and unfortunately, construction seasons and budgets don't line up. So we would have $600,000, $700,000 that we hadn't spent, and we'd have to carry it forward so that that $35,000 carry forward was more like $1 million something by the time we would get done. And Stuart Dexter absolutely correctly called us on that and said, it just looks like you're overtaxing us. Why are you doing that? Which is where we came up with the infrastructure reserve fund. So at the end of the fiscal year, everything that is left in those appropriated infrastructure budgets lapses into the infrastructure reserve, and Rob will bring it back out, which is what you're doing in your next order, reauthorizing projects. And then, so those are two. You
Right.
also funded some projects on the general fund through the capital infrastructure budget for FY22. And the last place that he has to keep track of is the downtown or the TIF budgets in general, because we will fund infrastructure projects out of those. So
Okay,
when we think of them, you're thinking like it's a project, and it would make sense if we just looked at it as a project. We
right.
have to think of silos of money. It's one of the only places we do silos in the town.
I like silos better than pots.
Yeah, true. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you, Sophie. And that also helps me with this next.
Rob, you mentioned contract administration and inspection costs in these projects, which I know we have with our projects. Are those all done through Oliver Associates?
Yes. So they will continue, they'll have on-site presence, daily on-site presence on the bigger projects. That's key because everything, a lot of the work, especially early on, gets buried. And so Joe and I can't be there 24/7 and still do all the other things that we need to do. So having somebody on site representing the town all the time really makes a lot of sense and is imperative for quality control.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ready for a vote? Nancy, please.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
Council Osha,
In favor?
Council Mitchell.
Yes.
And the vote is 6 in favor and there were none opposed.
Now we're going to move on to the item that was added to our agenda, Order 21-147.
Oh, it's 148, my mistake.
Oh.
I forgot the poverty abatement.
Order authorizing the town manager to expend up to $806,500 from the infrastructure reserve on the following FY22 capital infrastructure projects. Main Street Sidewalk Project, $600,000. North Main Chapel and College Heights, $145,000. College Avenue Sidewalk, $55,000. Riverdale Paving, $6,500.
Move approval.
In a second? Second. Thank you.
So we have an anticipated balance at year end in this account. Once we lapse the unexpended FY21 appropriations of $810,000. So Rob has certainly done his job here and maximized. So the infrastructure reserve is not designed to be a contingency account. The infrastructure reserve is designed to be a pass-through account where, or if we have to appropriate in phases where money would live, so that we have $3,000 left in the, budgeted to be left in the account, I think means that we're doing the job that we anticipated for that reserve. Jeff, you look like you have a question.
No, we had, I can't remember who I had the discussion with. But a comment was made to me that when we have reserves, these reserves should naturally go back to reduce our tax burden. And I think it's important that people know that we're not inventing new projects. So not a question at all.
Oh,
Just looking at that.
Yes, every dollar on this list was appropriated one way or another at some point by council. This just establishes our budget for FY '22.
Which they're already doing the sidewalk anyway, so.
Correct.
They are.
Any other questions or comments on this order? If not, we will have a roll call vote, please.
Council Green,
In favor?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard, Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Mitchell.
Yes,
And the vote is 6 in favor and then none opposed.
There. I think that concludes our orders.
I think you guys did a wonderful job.
Now we'll move on to
Thank you,
council committee representative reports. We have reports from council committees. I'd be happy to start with Finance Committee, which met on June 28th. And we had a presentation from the Penquist Organization on Affordable Housing. We had a contract to purchase, we had a discussion of a contracting to purchase solar energy credits. And we had a very informed expert with us for that discussion. Appreciate that. We had an introduction of our new assessor. We had a first discussion of the fire truck purchase. And we had a discussion, a first discussion of the regional climate action planning process with the memorandum of understanding with Bangor. And that was our Finance Committee meeting.
Mine was community development, which was on the 17th, which by the time we get to this, things have already been happening. So, but I'll just kind of give you guys a recap. We did a talk about the minor change to a mobile food vendors ordinance for the university from a site plan review to permit on mobile food vendor 2. Then we went to proposed marijuana ordinance revision, which Kyle provided a presentation on. Discuss setback standards and eligibility for stores. We had a really long discussion on C2 lots for business. Kyle will look at more setback options to see if any lots can be developed. Discuss if small scale cultivation could be in the LDR as well as F&A. Council kind of all agreed. Discussed nurseries, and Kyle will get back to us about what C1 would look like. We all agreed that F&A was okay. Then we had a review of conceptual plans of Main Street sidewalk and pedestrian safety project. Brad Lyon from Sebago Technics joined us and did a presentation. We also did a review of the RSU candidates and discussion of next steps, which we've already gone through and did all that. Then Cheryl graciously decided not to do her resolution on recognizing the climate emergency.
It was 9 o'clock. at
Yeah,
that
it was
point.
pretty late. And so that's where we were on that. And then we talked about the reevaluation project update on discussion of informal hearing process, and Mitch talked about the revow process. And that's what I had.
Environment Committee actually didn't meet last month because we were waiting for council status, where we sat and what we were going to, how we were going to start planning to move forward with July being our first fiscal year.
Anything else? DEI committee, anything to update us on that, Laura?
yeah, we are still collecting survey results. And so we did another push, but we had gotten in close to 300 responses, which was great. We'd love to get to 500. And so the town has put an ad in the Penobscot Times to encourage, and pushed it out again on social media to encourage participation in the survey. If you have not completed the survey, please do so. And the committee met to kind of begin compiling recommendations, and will continue to do that. Hopefully wrapping that up by early end of July, early August, and for a council presentation likely in September. So that's that.
Thank you. Lori, anything that you want to report from your legislative responsibilities?
The legislature ended a session, but then was called back for the veto day, which was supposed to be June 30th. And vetoes day stretched, that was a Wednesday, stretched until Friday at 3:45 in the morning. And we had a chance to pass other bills that had gone to the Senate but hadn't come back to us yet. And we also attempted to overturn vetoes, and we were unable to overturn any of this governor's vetoes. And because we were still meeting over bills, some of those bills eventually passed and then went to the governor. And so we are returning on the 19th for another veto day, because we have a certain number of days after she signs bills to attempt to overturn her vetoes. Certain number of days after she vetoes bills to attempt to overturn them. Of course, we need 2/3 to overturn them. So that's a pretty tall order. So we'll be returning on the 19th. I had many contacts from not only our town manager, but other town managers about a bill that was approving accessory dwelling units for single family homes. In our town, we already have addressed this, but this was an idea to put something at a state level to encourage an increase in number of housing dwelling units. And after we changed that based on the Maine Municipal Association's requests, and that bill passed, it hasn't gotten signed by the governor yet. So of course, our town is ahead on that because we are one of the towns that already had discussions of accessory dwelling units. But the idea is that it provides more housing and allows people who own their property to maybe make an additional unit, either as income or a way to support other family members who need a place to live. So I guess that's it. And I'm open for any questions. Anyone wants to talk to me about things that they'd like to see the legislature do. One of the roles of a state representative, a representative to the state legislature, is that I would be able to put in bills. So anyone can approach me and let me know what they think would be something when they have that feeling that ought to be a law. They're welcome to talk to me about it.
Thank you, Laurie. Appreciate your update. Okay, we're ready to move on to future agenda items or items of concern. Anybody have future agenda items or items of
Could
concern?
Sophie update us on the progress of the Bangor Gas project underneath Stillwater, in particular how that project is going to end and whether the garden committee is satisfied with how that's going to wrap up?
So my understanding is that Bangor Gas has worked pretty extensively with the garden committee. They pulled out the geotextile that was there so that they don't have to deal with it anymore. They have made assurances around the quality of material that's going to be put back in, because right now that's not the best growing material. And they have indicated that they're going to make a $2,000 donation to the committee. So we've set up an asset or a liability account to because it's not really ours. We're just holding it on the general ledger for the committee. I will tell you, it has been an interesting project. We right before it started, James Sweat came to see us with some concerns. So one of Dave Mylan's parting projects, and I think Mitch jumped in as well. So one of his first projects was negotiating between Bangor Gas and the Sweats to try to find some happy medium ground there. If you notice, they're not drilling as late as they otherwise could, according to, and that Bangor Gas, I think they did a nice job trying to meet the business needs. I don't think the business truly understood how impactful that was going to be as a project. We've had to make some changes midstream around traffic control, and that all comes through the state. So luckily, Rob has got really good relationships with the state, so he gets to weigh in and they listen to his concerns. So the latest request that came, there was a request last week to shut down North Main Avenue for through traffic, and Rob and I said no to that, and they're working around. So Bangor Gas has been really willing to come to the table and work with us when something has come up. everything that we're hearing is that they are on target to continue, but this is probably another several weeks. This is supposed to be an 8-week project. So we don't anticipate it ending until mid August, full cleanup by then. Mitch has been dealing with our beautification committee around the gardens, and Rob has been managing kind of the infrastructure, traffic control aspects. So if people have concerns about either of those two things, they should really reach out to those two staffers or to me, because you can reach out to me for anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes. Okay.
If everybody else is,
Are there any other items that need to be brought up at this time? Okay, Sophie?
say just a couple, when you talk about future agenda items, the Community Development Committee meeting is going to get noticed tomorrow morning. On that agenda, we have the climate action planning resolution that we were going to talk about before.
Right.
We also have Bob Bass from Orono Economic Development Corporation coming in to talk to us about the recreation center, the Caribou Bog project. They came with a request, and my point is that to Bob was that I really couldn't do anything for them until council told me that they approved and wanted to support a project, and they really haven't been in front of council yet. So this is a
They
first
haven't
step.
met
Yes,
yet.
yes. So this gives everybody an opportunity to ask questions and decide what the priority is for the town. And then the last thing, we have an update with the fiber project. Bell will be here to talk with us with Rob a little bit about how we might want to deploy the bond funds. And we just need very, very high level guidance so that we can come back with a proposal. But we need to understand what direction you guys want to go.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The Orono Economic Development Committee, is there one council member assigned to that? There are two?
Yeah,
Can we get updates on that committee on a more regular basis?
The committee is very loosely structured and rarely meets. And I've asked for updates myself, because when one person comes in as a committee member and says that they want something, it's odd to me. So I have reached out to the 3 members and as a board member, and haven't gotten any response. So I think that there's some restructuring or something that needs to happen. I'm not really sure. I've talked to Sophie about it. We're going to try to see what we can do with them. But I think they rarely meet, and they don't meet as a full committee. So it's
However, if they do become more active and do have regular meetings, I think getting updates at the council would be a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Mhm.
That's why we have representatives there.
Well, yes.
Anything else? Okay, I don't believe we have any public with us tonight. So we don't have public petitions or public comments, but we have an executive session. And there was some discussion
Tom?
about handle that.
Tom, we do have one member of the public, but I don't know that they wish to speak. There is no hand up. I just want to make sure that you're aware that there's somebody here.
They don't have a hand up. We'll just move on.
So talking with Bell, what we determined would be the best thing. Folks received a link to an executive session meeting. So we're going to adjourn this meeting, go into our executive session. We will publicly vote, which means only the 4 people here can vote, because we can't vote remote with counselors on the order when we come out, because we have to get to a point where I can write findings of fact and have Tom sign for
Okay. So we are adjourning this session and taking a motion to move into executive session
Yes.
for the purpose of considering a request for a property tax abatement based on poverty and or disability. So we're gonna have a motion to move into executive session, please.
So move.
And a second.
Second.
And I guess we need to do a roll call vote on that.
Council Green,
In favor.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Robinson,
Yes, in favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
Council Osha,
In favor.
Council Mitchell.
Yes.
And the vote is 6 in favor and there were none opposed.
So Belle is going to close out this meeting and start the next meeting.
Yep,
And-
and then I will come in there and connect you guys to the next meeting as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
So can we take just a couple
Yes.
minutes? So